Late on the night of April 18th, 1775, two bodies of British troops were on the march. In Boston, around 800 grenadiers and light infantry assembled to embark in boats bound for the Cambridge shore and a fateful march inland to Concord the following day. 150 miles away, just 13 British soldiers arrived at Fort Ticonderoga, the first reinforcements in over a year. Their arrival, the same night as the march to Concord that would ignite the Revolutionary War, was coincidence. But it was a powerful reminder that Ticonderoga figured in the decision-making of British military and political officials and American councils and committees long before the war began. For years, violence in the New Hampshire grants, what is today Vermont, prompted New York officials to request troops of the British military to quell the disturbances and assert New York's claim to the region. Repeatedly, British military officials denied those requests, citing the availability of the province's militia. British military officers were unwilling to put their troops into territorial disputes between provinces without express authorization from the Crown. Furthermore, they cited the condition of Fort Ticonderoga, whose barracks were neither large enough nor in good enough repair to house the number of troops that would be needed if they were deployed. On March 13, 1775, settlers in Westminster, in the New Hampshire grants, blocked access to the courthouse, resulting in New York sheriffs and men opening fire and killing two. The Westminster Massacre solidified anti-New York feeling in the grants, and New York officials once again appealed for troops. New York's lieutenant governor encouraged General Thomas Gage in Boston that the soldiers' presence in the Champlain Valley would also allow them to operate against agitators in restless Massachusetts. Not long after, in late March, at the behest of the Boston Committee of Correspondence, Pittsfield lawyer John Brown undertook a mission to Canada to assess the feelings of the French, English, and Native American populations there. He noted emphatically that if hostilities began, Ticonderoga must immediately be taken to prevent an invasion from Canada. He recommended that the restive settlers of the New Hampshire grants were the best to accomplish this objective, the same people that had given the government of New York such headaches. At this time, General Guy Carleton, the governor of Canada, had issued orders to his officers to be vigilant. And as early as February 10th, Captain William Delaplace at Fort Ticonderoga had reported armed bodies of men in the area, and individuals asking pointed questions about the garrison. He dutifully reported these to General Thomas Gage, who ordered him to be on his guard to secure the fort's stockpile of gunpowder. Now, for the British, control of Lake Champlain, having a post here, was vital to preserving the lines of communication, especially between New York and Canada. This became all the more important by 1775 as General Thomas Gage in Boston was increasingly cut off from the surrounding countryside. By the time of Delaplace's report in February, government officials in England had already decided to reinforce and rebuild both Ticonderoga and Crown Point, meaning more troops and artificers would be deployed that spring. In advance, small detachments were sent to bolster the garrison. The first arrived on the night of April 18th, consisting of 9 men of the 26th Regiment of Foot and 4 artillerymen. Another 10 men and an officer of the 26th, Lieutenant Jocelyn Feltham, arrived 10 days later. These reinforcements almost doubled the size of the garrison, but still left it under strength, with fewer than 50 men of all ranks and half as many women and children. To prevent New York from sliding into revolt, Gage was finally considering deploying even more troops to the Champlain Valley, where they could join loyal New York militia to operate against the Green Mountain Boys in the New Hampshire grants. After dispatching the expedition to Concord on April 19, 1775, Gage instructed Governor Carleton in Canada to move the entirety of the 7th Regiment of Foot to Crown Point, or Ticonderoga. That same day, militia and minute companies drove the British column that had marched out that night all the way back to Boston. Provincial forces from across New England mobilized at the news, including Colonel Samuel Holden Parsons of New London, Connecticut. Arriving in the growing siege lines, Parsons, like many others, identified that little could be done to strike the British in Boston without artillery. Ticonderoga was identified as a solution to this, and additionally, the threat of the fort as a launch pad for British oppression coming out of Canada further justified its seizure. On April 28th, a day after returning to Hartford, Parsons and a number of collaborators, including Silas Deane, Samuel Willis, and Christopher Leffingwell, hatched a plan to take the fort and the cannon. They secured an advance of money from the Treasury and dispatched a party led by Noah Phelps and Bernard Romans. Captain Edward Mott of Preston, Connecticut, arrived in Hartford that same day. Speaking with one of the conspirators, Christopher Leffingwell, Mott independently suggested Ticonderoga might be seized for its artillery, and Leffingwell prevailed on him to join Phelps and Roman, who were already on that very mission. The following day, Mott and 5 companions mounted to begin the journey to Ticonderoga to join the Connecticut expedition. Shortly after, another Connecticut captain, Benedict Arnold, arrived in the lines outside Boston. On his way north, he had spoken with Samuel Holden Parsons about the artillery at Ticonderoga, but Arnold appealed directly to the Massachusetts Committee of Safety, urging them to seize the ordnance stored there. The committee empowered Arnold with a commission to raise a regiment and take Ticonderoga. By the beginning of May, the race was on. 2 separate American expeditions were pelting along the roadways of New England to seize Ticonderoga, while at the same time, General Gage had ordered a full regiment to reinforce the fort. The clock was ticking. Men were on the move. But unable to communicate over land, by the time Governor Carleton received Gage's instructions, Ticonderoga's fate was sealed.